Hello, everyone. My name's Kyle, and I want to thank you for joining us for the latest in our series of COVID conversations. And we're chatting with people from various walks of life, covering things like faith and science and sport and community. And we're also seeing how people are living life at the moment and coping with this worldwide pandemic that we're all going through. And today we've got the great pleasure of having Gavin Peacock with us, who's a former English Premier League football player and a TV pundit. And he's going to be chatting to us about life a little bit. But his life changed quite dramatically back at, I think it was 2008, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, when him and his family packed up bags in England and moved over to Canada. That's what we're going to chat about with Gavin today, a little bit about his life and where he finds his hope and what life is really all about. So Gavin, thank you so much for chatting with us and giving up your time for us today. First of all, just can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, because as we'll hear, you're not from Canada, and a little bit about your family and whereabouts in Canada you're living at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So I'm married to Amanda. We've been married for 30 years now, and we have two children, Jake, who is 26, and he's now married to Krista. She's a Canadian girl, and Ava, our daughter, is 23, and she's married to Austin, Canadian lad, and they're out here with us in Calgary, Alberta. They're all members of the church that we go to. But I come from the southeast of England, from the area of Kent. That's where I grew up. My dad, Keith, was a professional footballer for Charlton Athletic for 17 years. So I grew up around football, and then I actually became a professional footballer. I had 18 years in that profession, and then 6 years as a BBC pundit, Match of the Day, Football Focus, all of those shows, and the radio, and going to World Cups, and it was a second dream career. And then I kind of shocked everyone by giving it all up and leaving the UK and coming to Canada to finish my theological studies, with a view to coming back to England to actually go into church ministry, church leadership. But I've ended up staying here, and now we've been here for 11 and a half years now. So a big switch of fields, if you like. But that brings us to why we're, in a nutshell,
Awesome.
to why we're here.
Well, it doesn't sound like that you've been in Canada for 11 years, I'll tell you that. You've still got your English twang.
Yeah, I was 40 years old when I arrived, so...
Oh, right, fair. Obviously, with your dad being involved in football, he played for Charlton, am I right, you said?
Yeah.
So were you a Charlton fan growing up? Is that your team?
Yeah, I mean, I was brought up down the valley there, around the smell of the dressing room. I used to go down on school holidays and watch my dad train, and that was in the sort of 1970s. And they had players like Derek Hales was a star striker in those days, and I knew all the players. So with that, as with my dad as my role model, and with Charlton just being surrounding me, yeah, I supported them, and all I ever wanted to do was follow in my dad's footsteps.
Fantastic. And so when did you realise that actually, I'm a bit of a player. I could do all right here. When did you start sort of seeing the talent coming through?
Yeah, well, it was strange really, because I mean, my dad always encouraged me to do all sports and to try everything, but obviously football. And I wanted to do it. I mean, I wasn't the biggest kid on the block. I wasn't necessarily even the strongest, but he coached me quite well, and I was technically good with the ball, even at kind of 6 or 7 years old. And then he taught me the character stuff that I needed, which is vital, self-control, to curb my anger and channel it in the right direction, to come back from knockbacks, those kinds of things. So that even at a young age, maybe 7, 8 years old, then I started to play in the school team. And, I was then one of the better players and could hold my own with boys that were even a little bit older. But it probably wasn't till maybe I was 11, I got into the district team. And then a couple of years later, I was in the county team, County of Kent. That I was really starting to think, yeah, I could do this. And my dad encouraged me. I'm not saying you could you can do anything you want, and because I couldn't be a brain surgeon, I couldn't, there were certain things I couldn't have done. But he said, no, with the right hard work, you could make it in the game. And I think I came through where there were other boys that may have even had a bit more talent than me, but they didn't have those other character things and perseverance. And I played for England schoolboys at age 15, and then I was signed up by Terry Venables at QPR.
It's amazing, actually, what you're saying about that example of your dad to bring it in the character, and how that's the heart of a good footballer, taking that forward. It's really interesting and helpful. QPR was the first team that you signed for, am I right?
Yep. Yep.
And what was it like signing your first professional contract? I mean, thinking, wow, I've made it, this is it. What was that like?
Just turned 17, literally. I mean, I left school at 16, and then a couple of months later, I signed as a pro. Yeah, I mean, it's the schoolboy dream, very much so, to be a professional footballer around much of the world. So to be there, good club like QPR. I mean, there were other bigger clubs that wanted to sign me, Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool was interested. And I was a schoolboy, England Schoolboy International, but QPR had Venables, bright young manager, and they had a record of bringing young players through the youth system quite quickly. So that's why I signed there. But yeah, I mean, that's your job, you're going in every day. But it is a different mentality from schoolboy football to being now in the man's world, where it is business. It's hard, it's cutthroat. You've got to be able to take the mickey taking in the dressing room. You've got to learn quick. It takes a time for you to develop the steel in your legs that you need for rigorous top level training, day after day, week after week, on top of top level matches as well. It takes time, and you're really just a kid coming out of school. And I wasn't built like Wayne Rooney or someone like that. He's like a 26-year-old guy when he was 15, I think, Rooney. But yeah, so it's a period of adjustment as well, and you have to learn quickly. You have to, I always encourage young players as well as to, you need to have confidence, but you need to be humble as well, because a humble person learns, and you've got to be a learner. And I came through a couple of years there playing in obviously the youth team, but then in the reserves. And Jim Smith became manager at QPR, and he gave me my first team debut. I was just about a week after I turned 19.
Wow. And what was that like, coming out in front of thousands of fans? Different than playing on the park with your friends?
Different to playing on the park, different playing in the reserves. First thing, I remember on my debut, it was Sheffield Wednesday at home. We drew 2-2. It was on a plastic pitch. And the first thing I remember is speed. I'm surrounded by Terry Fenwick, who was our captain, England international, Gary Bannister, John Gregory, all these, good players. And all of a sudden it's zipped around. It's coming to you really quick. And, people don't realise, when you watch a game on TV or even, in the stadium, the speed of the game is huge when you get out there at first team level. And you have to think quickly, you have to look around you a lot, and you have to, it's adjusting to that speed. And you have to be able to do great skill at speed, and that's what the great players can do. You look at Messi and Ronaldo at the very top. They do a great tariff of high skill, but they do it at speed. And that was the thing that hit me. But then I was able to adjust and, got into the game and did okay, had a decent debut. And yeah, I remember, coming home after that thinking, wow, I've done it. I've made my first team debut. Not that I've made it. That's when the work really starts, is to then try and establish yourself as a regular. I mean, many people can play 1 or 2 games, but to stay in and have a long career is a different thing.
Amazing, yeah. So I was looking up before, 6 clubs that you played for, am I right? QPR, then Gillingham, Bournemouth, then Newcastle.
Yeah.
And then Chelsea, boo. And then you got to go to Charlton. Yeah. Following your dad's footsteps, which must have been amazing for you. Yeah. So I think 557 caps I've got down here, and 108 goals from midfield. Is that right? Yeah.
Well, actually, I mean, that's league. My total is, I played over 600 league and cup games, and I've scored, I think it's about 135, 135 goals. Yeah, I had a season where I played up front, but most of them were, most of my appearances were as a midfield player. So I was a goal scoring midfield player, and that's a kind of that I was when I was young. I thought, what kind of player do I want to be? And I loved Kevin Keegan. I posted him on the bedroom wall. I loved Glenn Hoddle, that midfielder that could spray the ball around. I loved Brian Robson. He could get a goal in his early days as well. He would get a goal from midfield. So I thought, well, I want to be the goal scorer midfielder. And so I developed into that over my career and was known for bagging a few from midfield.
It's quite impressive, I'd say.
Well, you know what it is as well? Managers find that the goal scoring midfielder is like gold dust, because if you can get 8 to 10 goals from a midfield player on top of your striker's goals, that's really valuable. And also, people love it in their fantasy football teams. I was in a lot of people's fantasy football teams in the 90s because I was a midfielder, but I get goals and make goals, and they get more points for having me. I was a better fantasy league footballer than I was a real life footballer.
That's very funny. That's great. What would you say is the pinnacle of your career that you thought, yes, that's it, I've done it?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, that I was my most free scoring for Newcastle, and we got promoted to the Premier League in a great team with Kevin Keegan. But I played my biggest games for Chelsea in terms of FA Cup final, European Cup semi-final, another semi-final in the FA Cup a couple of years after that. I scored winning goals against Manchester United in the league. So they were the pinnacle games in terms of the height of the standard. So that's what I was saying. But in QPR, of course, I played my most games over 2 spells because I started there and I finished there. So QPR has a special place in my heart because I spent my most amount of years there.
Just want to ask you some quick fire questions. Who was the best player that you played with?
Glenn Hoddle would be the best, even over all of the other great players. Superb football brain.
Who was the best manager who you worked under, would you say?
I'm going for Kevin Keegan, though. Inspirational.
Yeah. Who was the best player that you played against?
Eric Cantona. King Eric in the 90s. Probably no one that graced the Premier League quite like Eric Cantona in that period that I played.
Wow. Is there another team that you would have liked to have played for?
You know what? I grew up. So obviously I supported Charlton. I had a Newcastle shirt when I was 5 or 6 years old, I think, because my dad's side of the family were all Geordies. So it was quite amazing when I, all those years later, signed for a club where I've got the blood in the veins, the Geordie blood in the veins. But my second team growing up was Liverpool, actually, and I loved that era of John Barnes and those guys that Rushy and Dalglish and interestingly, Sammy Lee came and played at QPR just around the time that I was breaking into the first team, and Sammy took me under his wing a little bit. He used to, when I was getting close to the first team, he'd always take an interest in the reserve games. He scored again, and he did well in training today. And Sammy really was a great encouragement to me. So maybe Liverpool was a team that I would have fancied playing for, because just the total football they played in that era was just, no one around was playing the same way as them at the top level, I didn't think. Today,
if there was any player that you would love to play next to today, maybe in midfield, who would it be?
Obviously, I'd love to play with the very greats like a Messi or a Ronaldo, just to have that quick fire brain work around the box. Play with great players; they make you look better.
Absolutely. Last one, most important one. Who's going to win the Premier League this season?
No one.
He's probably right there.
Probably there's going to be no one.
Sadly. Just very quickly, what do you miss about football? Playing football?
2 things. One, being super fit. You do a job where you just kind of got this supreme fitness as well. as a byproduct or part of the job. And the other thing is being with the guys. I think in the dressing room, there's something about men gathered together where you're playing for a great cause where the risk is high and the reward is great, and that's what a lot of footballers, ex-footballers, miss is being with the guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you went on to retirement, but it didn't stop there. You, as you said before, you were involved in a lot of TV punditry work, Football Focus, Score, Match of the Day, radio stuff. Basically, a lot of people would maybe look at your life and think, "Wow, what a life he's lived, and what a life he's living." And then, as you said, all of a sudden you finished with the TV, and you moved to Canada to go do biblical theology in Bible college, and then to go on to be a church minister. So why such a massive change?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, I mean, it wasn't just in a moment. I mean, I've been a Christian since I was 18. So I had achieved the schoolboy dream, everything that the world says would bring you happiness, really. And the world still promotes that, you know, the fame, the money, the great career. You're doing something that keeps you fit. And yet I wasn't happy when I got to that place at QPR. Because football was my God. If I played well, I was up. If I played bad, I was down. So I'm up and down in that period of my life, and just thinking about the meaning of life and really the purpose of life. And one night, my mum just said, "I'm just going to go along to a local church," and I said, "I'll keep you company." I wasn't brought up in a Christian family. I just kept my mum company that night. The minister said, "I've got a youth meeting at my house after. Do you want to come back?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll come along." And I pulled up that night in my nice sports car, XR3i, it's a proper 1980s car, Ford XR3i. And I've got everything the world says should make you happy. But the other sort of 6 or 7 young people in the room that night, they didn't have what I had. But when they spoke about Jesus Christ and when they prayed, they had a joy and they had a reality and a purpose in their life that I didn't have. And it was then that I heard the minister unpack from the Bible, you know, what is the gospel? The gospel means the good news, and good news of what God has done to save people like us. And I realized, you know, after hearing from the Bible, I was created by God, for God, and yet, like everyone else, since the story of Adam and Eve and falling into sin, we've sinned against God, and that's the reason why there's all this fracture in the world. That I was therefore under the judgment of this good God, and yet by His great mercy and love, He provided a way back to Himself through the life, death, and resurrection of His Son Jesus Christ. And then I began to realize that my biggest need wasn't the approval of the crowd on Saturday. It was to be in a right relationship with the living God. And I believed. I became a Christian. Told the lads in the dressing room straight away. Got a bit of stick for it, but then they began to see my life and watch it and see is there consistency there. So that was way back when I was 18. And then I never thought about church ministry. I mean, I spoke at different things, but I never thought about being a pastor until around about 2006. And my career, the secondary career, is now really going well with the BBC. I was at the World Cup in Germany, and I began to really start to feel I might need to be doing a bit more in the church and maybe a bit of teaching and stuff. So I started some studies at Cambridge University, Old Testament and New Testament. I was on Match of the Day at the weekend, and all the lads that were studying with me, they wanted to talk about my comments on Match of the Day, and I wanted to study the Bible. And as I was doing it, it was growing in my heart more to do that. And I said to my wife, Amanda, look, I'm going to give it up to take some time to really prepare. We've been coming to Canada quite a bit. I said, you know, what would it look like to go to anonymity when no one knows me and they wouldn't get the football personality? And at that time, I was on TV all the time as well, so very well known. They wouldn't get that confused with what I was saying from the Bible. And it would be a big character test as well. And so I did, and, you know, that's why we stayed. And, you know, people ask me about it, and I say, well, even in the situation we're in now, look around you. People can't rely on your money. Look at the stock market, that's going down. Your job, well, that's out the window. What about health? Well, we're just being shown that that's very, very fragile, and death is in our face more than ever, but everyone will die. And what about people? Well, you can't even see the people you love in many ways at the moment. And so, what will you rely on? What is the true purpose? And of course, the Bible makes sense of it all for us and gives us true hope in this life and beyond this life as well. And of course, the hope beyond this life gives us the strength to carry on in these days. And so, doing what I do now as a pastor in the church is a great privilege, and it's a difficult job, as you well know. But it's a great privilege to be in people's lives and to help shepherd them along.
Absolutely. And so, obviously, your life looks very different now than being on TV and stuff like that. I mean, what sorts of things do you actually do during the day? What's the heart of what you're doing as a pastor of a church?
Yeah, well, I mean, my responsibilities would be as I'm like an assistant pastor. So for some people that won't know what that is, it's like being an assistant manager in football. So I'm one of the team there. I'll do some preaching and speaking on a Sunday. I will be involved in all the leadership meetings, be involved in giving people a lot of counselling people in their lives with their different problems, visiting them obviously when they're sick. And I do some writing as well. So I've written a few books on the family and those kind of things that serve the church more broadly. I also go and speak. I'm over in the UK, usually about 6 weeks, 7 weeks of a year, where I'm invited by churches to come and speak for a weekend. And I've gone around the world as well and spoken. And often people want to have a session where they'll ask me about football and faith, and people will come along and they're not Christians, but they're interested in football. And what's the connection?
Awesome. And just as we're sort of coming to an end now, and as you know, we're going through this pandemic, as you've mentioned, and people maybe thinking about life, reevaluating their life a little bit, and asking things like, "What is my life about? Where do I find meaning?" They're trying to find why they're even here on this earth. I mean, what would you say to people who are listening and maybe feeling like that at the moment?
Well, I mean, the Bible shows us, makes sense of this world, who created us, the purpose for which we're created, male and female, in the image of God, for God, to be taken care of by God and to trust in God. And it shows us that our biggest problem isn't our circumstances, but our sin against God, and that our great hope is found in Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ himself said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so I would say, if you're questioning these things, is to maybe ask a friend who's a Christian, if you know one, or get hold of a Bible and start reading the Bible. I always encourage people to look at the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. It's the shortest of the Gospels. It's 16 chapters, and the first 8 chapters, very short chapters, they tell you who Jesus is, and the second 8 chapters, they tell you what he came to do. So if you want to know who Jesus is and what he came to do, that's a really good place to start. So yeah, I mean, as I was saying earlier, life is short. You look back in just this last year has just gone like a flash, certainly for me. And we all will die at some point. We all will get old. We are fragile people, and so we've got to be thinking, what is the purpose of us being here, and is there anything beyond this? And I think the Bible will provide you with the coherent and true truth, if you like, to help you in this life.
Gavin, thank you so much. That was really clear and really helpful. And I want to thank you for sharing a bit of your life with us today. And we'd love to see you back in the UK at some point. You're always welcome. I mean, I'm in Scotland, so you're welcome up to Scotland anytime, as long as Nicola says it's okay. Thank you so much for giving your time to us today. And thank you for listening in at home. And we do hope that you've enjoyed just listening along to Gavin's story. And keep looking out for more COVID conversations. And we would encourage you to stop and to think about life again, and to think about who the Lord Jesus is. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks.